Hey y'all, welcome to my third week vlog. Today is Monday, July 27th. Um, so let's just get into it. Um, Last week was a really heavy week in training for us, so we talked about, we finished the mental health first aid training that I talked about before, and then we did Title IX, which was a basically full day of talking about supporting students after sexual trauma. And then we did emergency response, which was heavily focused on um, earthquakes. So it was somewhat of a stressful day for me, I guess mentally, because I've never experienced an earthquake. So preparing for these catastrophic natural disasters um, without ever having gone through any level of an earthquake, to be talking about what we do in, worst case scenarios was a little bit nerve-wracking. I also last week had my first one-on-one with my supervisor. It flew by. We only allotted 30 minutes just for an introductory kind of, how are things going, what do you need from me, what are you looking forward to this year, all of that kind of stuff. But she was really funny and interesting, and also very easy to talk to, and it seems like she's very knowledgeable. I think she said about 35-ish, so that's an interesting difference from some of the other supervisors that I've had, who have often been very close to me in age. And then also she's my first supervisor ever in any position or role to have children. So I'm very interested to see what her experience is like around raising children while also trying to have a career. She also asks questions that bring up things that are on my mind, so I don't have to bring up these things that are puzzling me, or that are running through my mind and things like that. She typically seems to ask about it, not only in that one-on-one setting, but just in general when she checks in with me. And I just left that one-on-one with a big smile on my face. I'm really excited about this year, and to have a supervisor that I feel like I really meshed with pretty immediately. Last week we also had our retreat, which was very exciting. It was 2 days, 1 night, up in some mountains somewhere or something, where we had no cell phone service, and we're living on Wi-Fi and just getting to know each other, and planning and learning about our department and things like that. So that was very nice. It was the first time they'd done a retreat in a few years, so most of the people who were working in the department now had never been on a retreat here before. So it was a first for all of us. The first day was really more tasky and felt like it was a continuation of the training that we were already going through here. But we did Strengths Quest for my 4th time. We talked about assessment, we talked about the role of committees, which was really interesting because the department at UConn for me seemed very committee driven, and apparently that's not the culture here, but that's what we're trying to move toward under the direction of our new director. And then for me, I'm supposed to be having conversations with my supervisor as they go into their placement meeting this Friday, trying to figure out what I want out of my committee experience. So for me, it's a bit of a dilemma based on, do I want to be on a committee that is based on my interests, or on previous experiences, or on my goals for development or areas of growth for me, and like figuring out if this is something that I'm not super interested in. Is it a committee that I want to devote myself to for a year? If it's something that I don't feel like is going to be a large part of my career trajectory, and being intentional about it, but figuring out what's going to be best for me in the long run. Day 2 of the retreat, we did quite a few circles. So circles are a large part of our structure here. Basically, everyone just sits in a circle and there's a talking piece, and everyone gets the chance to answer a prompt without being interrupted and without having to, answer any additional questions or anything like that. They just get to talk. and that's something that we try to implement with our students and amongst ourselves here. But we also talked about identity in the workplace and a few other topics, but it was really much more focused internally and how we belong and function in this department, which I appreciated and thought was more what a retreat would be. Surprises. So for me, something that I found surprising by the end of the retreat was that I felt like all of the RDs sitting around the room were competent. And I don't mean that to throw shade at anybody, but in other institutions that I've been at and just things that I've witnessed, I've always felt like there were some RDs or hall directors or what have you who were on different levels. And here I feel like, I never feel like, oh, I feel bad for that person's staff or anything like that. I feel like everyone who interacts with my peers here is pretty fortunate, at least at this point. I was also surprised that there is, or wasn't, a social justice committee, which I think I might have talked about last week, I can't remember. But now that's being folded into our residential curriculum committee, and so it's going to be residential curriculum and inclusion, and they're supposed to look at how we're implementing our programming and educational model while also looking at how we're practicing inclusion, which I think is a good start, and I'm excited to see where that goes. I think that's my first choice for a committee, but that's a lot of people's first choice, so who knows how that'll end up. To continue learning my position, we're finishing up onboarding this week, so the formal training piece will be over in a few days, and then next week I'll have more free time to devote to kind of structuring my own learning around this position. But I also don't know how much time I'll reasonably be able to devote to that because my staff is going to be coming that following weekend. So I need to be preparing for training them and bringing them into their positions. I'm really excited because this year I'll be supervising 10 students, and out of that 10, I think 6 are going to be new to their roles. Well, 6 are going to be new to the RA role, and then I have a student who was an RA who's going to be my CLA, which is the Community Leadership Assistant, and so she'll be new to that role, and so it'll be interesting to help her transition into that as well. But last year at UConn, I supervised 4 returning staff and 2 new staff, so it was a very different kind of balance there. I think to make yourself known as a competent professional, for me, I think it's been really important to contribute authentically to the conversation and not come from a place of trying to prove myself, but coming from just being myself. And then I also feel fortunate in that I don't really feel a need to prove myself to the other people here. They treat me like an equal already, and on multiple occasions, and not because of anything I've done or anything that I've said to prompt this, but they've tried to make very clear that regardless of my age or being fresh out of grad school, or there's another new RD who has never worked or lived in housing before, that kind of thing, none of that matters because they trust me to do the job, and they see me as an equal and a peer. And just because I don't have the, I guess, knowledge of this institution specifically doesn't mean that I don't have other knowledge to contribute. So I really appreciate how they've approached that. So advice that I have along those lines, trusting yourself. And then also, and this has been, I guess, a big one for me in the last week, and also a piece of like learning for me, so advice / things that I've learned. Lean into change, and I also mean that for yourself and for unintended growth that happens. So specific example, I redid Strengths Quest, and even though they've been pretty consistent, my top themes have been pretty consistent over time. This time I lost 2 of them. They dropped into my top 10 versus top 5, whatever. And I was really bitter about it, and made sure everybody knew about it, especially because empathy was something that I prided myself in, and it seems like half the department here has empathy as a top strength, and I no longer do. Or at least not the day that I took the assessment this time. And instead of devoting my time and energy to being upset about that, I started thinking about what that might mean and where that might come from, and kind of understanding that my new top strength, connectedness, could have developed out of that empathy, and could be another form of that empathy that is still just as useful. So being okay with that, but then on a larger scale, also acknowledging that before, 4 of my top strengths were in the relationship building category, and 1 was in strategic, whatever that one is. And now I have 2 in the strategic realm and 3 in relationship building. So being okay with shifting away from being so heavily in the relationship building section. And for me, that's also been a struggle, because since undergrad, I've always kind of had this reputation as this very warm, friendly, feelings-led kind of person, and that's changing, and that's something that people are acknowledging. So I have friends that'll say things like, you know, I understand that you're not very into the feelings and mushy-gushy type of stuff, and for me, I've always felt like I have been, but maybe I'm not. And being okay with, you know, to some extent being that kind of person, but also, you know, being logical or thought-driven, or however you want to phrase it. So that's still something I'm processing, but just being okay with this new version of myself also being an authentic version of myself, if that makes any sense. Moving on. My last piece of advice would be to get yourself lost a little bit. So this is, for me personally, not a professional thing, but to help myself learn the surrounding area, I will use my GPS to get to different things, so restaurants or stores and things like that, and then just try to find my way back without using any kind of GPS or anything like that. And for me, it's been really helpful in finding or learning the surrounding area. Yeah, so I believe that's all for this week. I'll see you next time for the last one.